This is the Planetary Potential Podcast for those who are eager to explore entrepreneurship, innovation, and cross-cultural communication in exciting and interesting places around the world. And now, here's your host, Andrew P. Rowan.
Welcome to Episode 5 of Season 1. How do you close $1 million sale? Raji Burhum, co-founder and CEO of Amigo Cloud, shares the value of executive coaching, the steps he took to adopt a different mindset, and how he reoriented pricing in his proposals. Founded in 2013, Amigo Cloud offers Geographic Information System or GIS solutions for a variety of applications, including private industries such as mining and utilities, as well as government. Earlier this year, in May, Raji announced that Amigo Cloud had been acquired by Essential Services Group for $16 million. My conversation with Raji took place just after he had made the announcement at an event in Lima. An important reminder that opinions shared on this episode are those of individual guests. For more information, please visit www.andrewprowan.com/disclosures. This was Raji's first in-depth interview after his public announcement, so let's kick things off to find out more about his experience thus far with Amigo Cloud. With me is Ragi Burhum. He is the CEO of Amigo Cloud. We are here in Comunal, which is a co-working space in Lima, Peru. And he just finished a fireside chat at a PECAP event upstairs and has graciously taken the time to continue the chat down here. So welcome, Raji.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
I understand that you recently moved back to Lima from San Francisco. Can you talk a bit about what prompted that move and how has that transition been so far?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I don't even know what move back means, right? So I guess I could say I moved out of Lima 21 years ago, 22 almost, in 1997, 22.
Wow.
I've been living in the U.S. for that whole time, but the past couple years, especially the last year, I've just been traveling a lot to see customers. So, and I spent a lot of time in South America and I spent a lot of time in different cities in the U.S. So even though I lived in San Francisco, really like last year, I didn't live in San Francisco.
So you're officially based in San Francisco?
Yes, I guess so. Like I still have to travel a lot to the U.S. I travel a week, almost every other week. So I don't know. I guess I'm closer to some of the South American customers now.
Okay, so then the decision was more of a logistical one.
Yes, and
more practical, let's say, than any sort of changes in the U.S. politically over the last.
Yeah. No, it has nothing to do with that. I think it's mostly for personal choice. I think with Amigo Cloud, what we have offices, in co-working spaces in different places, and so we have one here in Lima in Comunal. People work out of Seattle. We had co-working space in San Francisco. A lot of people work from home. And so for us, it's more important the longitude, like the time zones, more than the actual physical place where you're at.
Yeah.
So, if you have internet, you can work.
Right. And so when you say time zone, are you referring to complementary time zones in the sense that you, during your day here in the West, you have your output, and then there's another team perhaps in Asia that picks up on that? No. Or are you talking about having your whole distributed team in the same time zone?
Yeah, it's mostly about having the whole distributed team in the same time zone. What happens, I think, at certain scale, we probably will migrate to the other option that you're mentioning. When I did Moldwalks, which was my first startup, we did work with people from Ukraine, right? So it was a completely different time zone, and we were based out of San Francisco. And so, there's advantages where you go to sleep and then you wake up and new features and new things are in the repo and they're done. And there is advantages, which is coordinating. So you're either going really fast because you're getting features done right away, a lot of stuff within the span of one day, or you're actually going slow because the communication lines are wrong. It takes you more than a day to fix something, right? So it depends on how you look at it. For us, I think it's easier to have everybody in the same time zone, physically in different places, and it's okay. Not to that we wouldn't hire somebody in a different time zone. I think we would.
Yeah.
Right? I think, challenges, talent is everywhere. So there's challenges about having somebody in different places. I've done it before. And it's just, you have to get used to the way you're doing that.
So then can you talk about the in-person interaction?
Yeah.
For example, do you have offsites? Or do you have like a summit, an annual summit?
Yeah, once a year we do, right? So like last year, we have everybody coming into Lima, and that was the vote because most people wanted to get to know us, especially the guys in the US or whatever. So, you do events a whole week where we all work together, and it's really nice. You want to have that face-to-face interaction.
Yeah.
And so, rented. We had a nice little party, and like one of the guys that is in our team is also like a relatively famous musician here in the rock scene. So he did a concert with us with this thing in like the rooftop of one of the places. Wow. We rented a little yacht.
Very cool.
And it was fun, right? You want that interaction, but it's not the only face-to-face interaction. Sometimes, again, this year, there was an important conference for us. We're in GIS, so there's like an open source GIS conference in San Diego, FOSS4G. And, we had some folks fly in from Seattle, and then some folks from Lima, and then, some from LA, and they go and get to see each other face to face during that conference. It's not the entire team, but it's like people that are relatively, need to work together, certain things. And so you get other opportunities to get the face to face, even if it's not the yearly gathering. But the yearly gathering is the one that really marks.
And have you had voting yet for this year's?
No, we don't, but it's in December, so we're gonna have to wait.
It's a bit too early then.
I think that a lot of them want to do somewhere in the US. And you might actually do that. It's just, I don't know if it's gonna be San Francisco, the little budget for that.
So in the Americas, where is most of the team, and what's the breakdown in terms of?
Yeah, it's 23 of us right now, and we hired 2 more, so it's gonna be 25 in the next month. But we have folks in Seattle now. The ones in California are moving into Seattle. We have people in Arequipa, in Lima, so those are in Peru.
Sure.
We have somebody in Chile. We just hired somebody in Argentina. We just sent an offer to somebody in Brazil. We have, just people. One in, we're hiring another one in Colombia. So there's people like here and there. But, we use the traditional tools that you would think of to work together. So like even if they're physically separated, use Slack. We do a lot of Google Hangouts. And there's a lot of teams that do that. GitLab team is well known to do that. The WordPress guys are well known to do that. So we've adopted some of the learnings from those companies to adapted it to us, right?
Sure.
Do the same.
Sure. So now that you're back here in Lima, at least for the foreseeable future, right? Is there anything that you really missed while you were away, and now that you're back, you're like,
oh yeah. Listen, I love a lot of things about Lima. This is my home country anyways, right? So I love this place. But I do have a love for the US too. I've just been there for a long time. And, my partner, she's from there. And so I have ties there, right? Like grew up there, I have friendships that I've cultivated literally for decades. And so, I do, but I also have my childhood friendships that are here. So it's, and I travel a lot, so I don't feel like I'm in one place or the other, but there are things that I love that I've missed a lot from being in Peru. The food was one of the things. We have good food here.
Yeah, ceviche,
I grew up getting used
causa.
to. Yeah, ceviche, causa rellena, lomo saltado, chow.
Chancho alfalo.
Yeah, it's a mecca of food. I think most people don't know that, but it is, And it's got some beautiful places beyond Machu Picchu. Machu Picchu is great. Most people go get to see that. But like you've been to Piura. Like I don't know if you had time to go to the coast.
Yeah.
The coast.
Colan.
Yeah. Or whatever. There's.
Capacao.
Yeah. You didn't go to Cajamarca, right?
No.
Man, Cajamarca is beautiful too. Like we have the Amazon River that starts. We have like the entire rainforest. We got, el Cerro Siete Colores. There's all kinds of things, even just in the Andes, right?
Yeah.
That are beyond just what people normally do. So like I missed all that. I really did.
What about the
things that drive me nuts? Right?
If you want to go,
I'm gonna go there. I mean, the things that drive me nuts is the lines, man. So like the moment that you get out, like the plane, and everybody rushes into, like the lines for immigration. It's like, oh man, I'm back in Peru, right? Like, you contrast getting out of the plane in Houston, and it's like everything is ordered. Like if your bag has a tag that says, priority, like you're guaranteed that it'll come out before the other ones, or it'll be there, right? Like the little nuisance like that. If you travel a lot, I mean, it sounds so, I don't know, superficial, like you want your bag to be there when you get out. But man, if you travel all the time, you just want it there.
And that time adds up.
Yeah.
In little slices.
And so here it's like, it doesn't matter if it has the tag or it doesn't. Like it'll be the last bag that comes out, right? Or like the lines, everybody trying to cut off in front of you.
Yeah.
Right. And it's, contrast that in the US, where like when everything is efficient, right? Like lines, people know how to do lines. Like, I don't know if you will notice this, but you can go to any place in the US and it doesn't matter how hectic it is. If there is some resource that people need, automatically, without thinking, the lines form. You'll see one, and then the other one goes behind, the other one goes behind. It's just like an automatic response. There's nobody telling you, please make a line or whatever. It's just happens, right? Like in the US, in Peru, it's not like that, man. It's like everybody's trying to cut you off, and like it seems more like, something you would see in other countries. And so like that drives me nuts, and it seems so trivial, but it does. And it's just, it's a trade-off.
Yeah, my initial thoughts are the Brits have queues down even better than the Americans.
Yeah.
And the scene you describe in the airplane, and
you'll notice that you cannot unsee what I just told you.
Asia as well.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I didn't want to say it, but it's like in Asians like that, right? Right? It's the same way. Love a lot of things from the Asian culture, but like, we all have a little quirks on things.
Yeah.
And so
what stood out to me is how little respect the drivers have for pedestrians here.
Oh, yeah.
And I mean, I'm talking about at crosswalks where there are speed bumps and it says stop.
So
and they'll just do a cruising
I got a story for you that one of my programmers was telling me when he was in San Diego in the last conference, right?
Yeah.
Like, and it's in contrast. Like when my GIS director came in for our December meeting, right? It's like there was a crosswalk, there were lines, white lines where, people are supposed to walk.
Yeah.
And he just started walking, right? And a lot of the times, all the people who were coming from the US, they had to be grabbed by one local was like, what are you doing, man? You almost died. Because they would just try to cross and assume that people would stop. And like, no, right? But you contrast that with, when the guys from Peru are in the US and they're trying to cross, right? And as soon as they're walking in, my GIS director, same guy that almost got run over, he's just crossing the street in San Diego. And like the Peru guy just grabs and it's like, what are you doing? Like, dude, they're stopping. They're just gonna stop. You
got to know the local context.
Yeah, exactly. So it's funny because the same guy had two different experiences and it like kind of switched, right? When he was here and the other guy was there.
Well, I mean, to be fair, using that precautionary behavior is going to save your life.
For sure.
More places.
Listen, when you travel a lot, you learn, rules like, should I drink tap water? Right? Is the tap water drinkable? Should I boil the things that I cook noodles with and things like that?
So I got into the habit of consuming only bottled water.
Yeah.
Of course, having lived in Asia, and of course that's a good rule of thumb here as well. Other parts of Latin America. When I'm back in the US, sometimes it's a bit hard to switch between the two.
Yes, for sure.
And of course, want to be mindful of waste and consumption of single-use plastics.
Yeah.
But have there been moments where you've forgotten?
Of course. Like
here in the last 3 weeks?
Times where I have to stop and like say, okay, where am I? Okay, I'm here. Yeah, this is valid. Like I'm in Chile, for example, in Santiago, you can drink tap water, right? But it's South America. and everybody's talking to you in Spanish. So you like associate. It's almost like I'm talking to you in English. So there's certain things that trigger to me like, oh, this is how I should behave when people talk to me in English. So like there's certain patterns that I will just do. And when I'm speaking in Spanish, it just switches to other patterns. But it just happens that, Santiago and Lima are very like similar in language, but like I just have to sit down and think it through. Right?
So you're saying that between English and Spanish, there's certain associated behaviors and norms that you naturally transition between. And is that something that you're aware of in the moment, or is it something that you look back on, maybe replaying situations, and you're like, yeah, like if this had been in English, this situation, it would have gone a different way?
Yeah, for sure. And that doesn't just happen with, food and water. It happens, when you're in front of a customer in sales, right? Like the way that you do sales or how you interact with a customer in the US, for example, is very different than the way you interact with one in Latin America. And, the jokes are different. The way that you connect with the other person is different, right? And to actually be able to do a sale, for example, you need to connect.
Yeah.
And so
That's
you have to be
denominator.
you have to be aware of that. And you could have the best product in the world, and if you can't really describe it to a customer, or the customer doesn't feel that they can trust you, even if everything is perfect, you're not going to make the sale. So you have to actually adapt to those cultural changes, and language is a big part of it.
What I've noticed in particular is that respect relationship between customer and service provider is more heightened, of course, because of the words you use for you in informal versus formal.
Yeah.
But also, when you're having a discussion in Spanish, there's a lot of, I'd say, like pre and post conversation filler, like in the way that you introduce yourself, and then of course the way that you transition away,
just
like
interaction, how you say hi.
Yeah.
Right? Like if you are in Peru, for example, the hi with a female, you give a kiss in the cheek, right? Like if I did that in the US when you say hi, it's like sexual harassment, right? Like people in the US like their personal space.
Yeah.
Right? But like if you give personal space with a hi in Latin America, it may even be offensive, like, hey,
Cold.
like it's too cold. Right? So you have to adapt to those things. But it's just like every culture. Like it's funny you mentioned with the languages, how the grammar is set up. Right? I studied in a German school here in Lima. So when I talk to my dad, for example, speaking German, and my brother or my sisters, like they speak German. They're German, right? They live in Berlin, and so I mean, we want to talk about grammar in German is very different and culturally too.
Yeah.
Right. And so I haven't done a sale. Like I think we do have a customer in Germany, but I don't think I did that in German.
Would you have the confidence to attempt to close a sale in German?
I don't know. I don't think I think there are. I don't think I am yet. I think I could if I spend 6 more months there and I picked up the mannerisms of things. But like right now, at this stage, I would just regress back to like, okay, let's do this in language I feel comfortable with.
Yeah.
So you have to really adapt to that.
On the topic of sales and confidence, I want to dive a bit deeper in that because in the talk upstairs, you said something really interesting, which was that you had 2 investors. These were angel investors who had helped you think about closing deals much in value amounts much higher than you expected. If I recall correctly, these angel investors invested about 25,000 US each and helped you get the confidence and have that mindset to close $1 million deal.
Yeah, more than that, actually. So Christopher Mayer and Ken Arnold, those are 2 angels that started working with us. We have many investors, and I love my investors, great investors. But Ken and Chris spent a lot of time with us and with me personally, right? And they coach me through a whole bunch of things. I mean, Chris, at one point when we had a customer that we were doing a, like we were gonna do a partnership deal. It was the first partnership deal, significant partnership deal that I was gonna sign. And beyond just coming in and spending time with us and training us, like just seeing how we were thinking and everything. Chris went back and the next day came back with a full-blown analysis of the cultural aspect of what my customer was. He gave me a PowerPoint with like, I don't know how many slides, but it was like, this is your customer. This is how they think of it. This is like what I found where culturally they really stick. They're very proud of how they do this manufacturing process.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something that they invented 15 years ago. And like, you should really touch upon this because it resembles that. And like, he just full blown analysis. And I was like, oh my God, like Chris just gave me the structure of like, this is how I should approach all my other future important deals with customers, where I do have to do an analysis, not just of like how much money they make and what their budget is, but like who they are as a company.
It's like a holistic framework that you use.
Yeah, and so it was an eye opener for me. I had never seen anything like that. And then Ken,
this is in SF, right?
in SF, yeah, they're based out of SF. And Ken did, something similar. Ken sold his company to Oracle, right? I think it was something like 500 million or something like that. And, he just approaches sales. He's a very technical guy. He's an MIT guy. And he just, told me a story about how, I started getting introduced to all these concepts, right? Like, listen, he said, I thought I was a good salesperson until I had a guy that I paid X, amount of dollars for sales. And, when I was trying to close in hundreds of thousands of dollars, I just, tried to close $1 million deals. And I realized how bad of a salesperson you are. And he said, Raji, you suck as a salesperson. He was like, oh, what do you mean I suck as a salesperson? I'm like, you suck. You think, and I really liked that he did that, because it challenged me to think like, wow, why can't I close a $1 million deal? I'm like, I think I can. It's just I have never like put that in, it's just a proposal, right? And then, Ken did the little details when I have my proposals and I had times. Ken taught me something else. Well, actually, Chris did this too. The demo together. He's like, Raji, look at your proposal. Your proposal has hours. Man, like, why are you putting values in hours? Like, you're crazy. I'm like, what are you talking about? It's like, this is how long it's going to take us to build this. It's like the moment that you put hours, you're never charging for value. So what Ken was saying was, Ken and Chris were saying together is, you can never charge for value if you're charging by the hour. If what you have is hours, right? And so that just changed my situation. Like, never again would I, in my proposal, would I have a hourly stuff in there.
So you switch to flat fee, or?
Well, it's not a flat fee. It's just how you think about it, right? Like, if you're doing a $2 million deal, like, how many hours are you charging for, and what's your hourly rate? Like, how do you get to $2 million, right? And justify it. Because it's like, oh, is this really going to take you, I don't know, 200,000 hours? Or is it going to take you, why don't you just do it for half, right? And they have an argument out of that. But you don't want to get in that conversation. You want to get in the conversation of what is the value that I'm giving to you? How much money am I making you, or how much money I'm saving you?
Yeah.
That's it. And if you can do those things, then it doesn't matter if it takes you 1 hour or if it takes you 3 months or a year, because you're selling by value, right? They're getting something out of it. They're either making money or they're saving money, and it's a specific amount. It's your job to capture a percentage of that.
And it's an amount that they can agree on, and you can verify.
If I can tell you something where I say, I sell you this, you spend $100,000, and you're going to save $3 million, then you're going to say yes. Yeah. You don't care if it takes me an hour or 2 hours or like no time. You're going to say yes, because I'm bringing you something of value, right? And so that, I learned from them.
Yeah.
Right.
So as soon as you started applying this new framework to your proposals, how long did it take before you started noticing an impact?
I think, my pipeline was very light at the time. So it wasn't like a matter of like changing my mind, but like, how the type of customers that fit that profile. But I would say within 6 months, I saw, or 3 months, I saw like me getting a little bit ballsier with my numbers, and they just kept increasing, right?
So even after that conversation, the way that you approached customers was different. The way
For
that you
sure.
searched for customers
For sure.
was different.
For sure. Well, a lot of the customers that we had earlier on, and and up to an extent, still that what we have, they're inbound,
Mm.
and so they find us, but the way that we qualify them, right, to figure out like what's the product that we're going to sell to them, and which range of, because we have a whole range of products.
Yeah.
Some of them that are off the shelf SaaS, and some of the shelf SaaS, and some other stuff that is, ready to make, like, some stuff that requires configuration.
Yeah.
Then that stuff is, it's more costly because we have to, customize it for them. But, every time that you're selling like anything over, I wouldn't even say a few $100,000, like, there's something with the workflow of the customer that's there that you just gotta need to adapt to. Unless you're Salesforce, I guess, where you sell for an absurd amount of money, you don't customize it.
So this seemed to be a really hyper valuable moment that you had with your investors.
Yeah,
And it was, net positive for
sure.
You also mentioned before in the talk upstairs about a really, I think, difficult period where you had raised $850,000.
Yeah, pretty much most of the round that we raised. After that, we had some loans that we paid back, but like that, it was most of the round to the convertible notes. And you're talking about the time when I say, oh yeah, what was the most difficult thing? I'm like, it's not the most difficult thing in the startup. It's like the most difficult thing in my life, right? Which was being in a position where I had people that had trusted me, and they left jobs at good places, well-paid jobs, to do this, to join us. And, also people, like, if I go and I do a pitch to an investor, like they're trusting me that I'm going to give them a return. And then you see, oh, you spend all the money and the market fit is not quite there yet. And that's horrible, right? Like, it's a horrible feeling. It's like you feel like you failed everybody.
So how long ago was that time period?
That was probably 2015.
2015.
2015.
Okay.
End of 2015, yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah.
And
16. I think I get to say it. 2016 was probably the most difficult year of my life, for sure.
So when did you realize that you were going to have a lot of uncomfortable conversations?
You just look at the bank account. You just look at the bank account, you look at the sales pipeline, and you see what the closing rate is. You know where it's going, right? So, but I try to look back and figure out like what are the things that made it so we could survive that whole area. All I remember was a difficult time in my life.
Did you have an executive coach or someone who would help
you?
you?
The angels that I mentioned, Ken and Chris, would come in every once in a while, and they think they even helped even more at that range. I think so. You have certain investors that are active investors, other investors that are more passive, and nothing wrong with that, right? I think you learn to really appreciate the active ones. Even,
was there another key lesson to learn other than the product market fit
for
that time period?
I mean, it's grit, right? I think every entrepreneur will tell you that when they go through the bad parts, which happens, it's just grit. Learning grit is difficult. Like, it sounds so simple, right? Like, oh yeah, it's listen, it would have been so easy to just disbail. We're done. That's it. Close it. Close shop, right? and then you just move on to another job and you recharge. And you're in Silicon Valley, you're gonna pay a shitload of money for doing something, and and then recharge and you come back. But it just didn't want to do it. I think everybody, at least the my GIS director, my co-founder, and I, like, we just said, let's just push through because we still had customers, not enough to make us survive, but enough that I could see, like, I just had to work 3 times as hard to get more customers, and it was fine. I think now I look back at that, and I'm actually really proud that I went through that. But I'm telling you, I don't know if most people can recognize what is the hardest moments of their life is like,
I mean, while they're living it?
while they're living it, and even afterwards. Like, I can easily point out. I mean, it might sound a little bit silly, but a lot of people would say, like, my hardest time was when ex family member died, and I had family members died, and like, of course, I was super super sad, and it's not like I'm a horrible person or anything, but like, yeah, of course, I had people that have gone through diseases and stuff, and like, it's horrible, right? Like, I can think about lots of things, but to me, my horror story comes in like 2016, the whole year. It was horrible. It was a horrible year, right? And and just the outcome that we have now, I'm pretty proud of it. It's not like our $1 billion exit or whatever, but everybody makes money.
You have an acquisition off.
Yeah, no, we have an acquisition signed, right?
Okay, well, congratulations.
Thank you. Yes. And so, I mean, this is, going back to my angels that talk about, Jen introduced me to multiple concepts, right? Like, I think there's certain words that you hear and then you cannot unhear, and you hear them all the time. Like, you're talking like, hey, this, if you do these things, this is how you generate, you know, multi-generational wealth, right? Like, multi-generational wealth. Like, you think I learned that concept in my 30s, right? Like, I've never really grasped like what it's like. There's wealth and there's multi-generational wealth, wealth that will pass. Like, if you play your cards right and you do it correctly, it's just wealth that goes across generations. Right? And I think most people in the world don't grasp that concept, right? They say like, oh, yeah, it's a millionaire. I'm like, dude, $1 million doesn't even buy you an apartment in San Francisco, man. Right? $1 million, you could be a millionaire and not be able to have a 1 bedroom apartment in Soma. Like, that's not enough, right? Or two, like, maybe then you buy one and that's it, you're done, right? Like, that's all your money. Like, and you start talking about like multi-generational wealth. It's like, well, what does that look like? How does it that you structure your business, your earnings, and all these things so you can reach that? And it's just a different way of thinking, right?
And would you say that similar? You used a specific phrase, learning grit.
A grit, yeah.
And would you say this is a similar way of thinking about it, like learning the power, the potential of multi-generational wealth?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I've achieved it yet, right? I don't know if we're there yet, whatever my concept is of that. But I think that the beauty of Silicon Valley in general, right, is that you get exposed, even grit, right? Like, going back to that phrase, I think most entrepreneurs will really understand. Most entrepreneurs, yeah, I mean, Silicon Valley, obviously, in the other places too, but I think of Silicon Valley and San Francisco, the Bay Area, these places are special because somebody will grasp like that what you mean by grit, right? The founder will grasp it. In other places, I would say not the majority would, but a founder in those areas does, because you're just so surrounded and you see so much failure and you see so much success that you understand what that is like. And once you live it, then it's just a different word. There's so many words that are, you know, charged with so much emotion and meaning. For me, that's one of them, right? Like when a new entrepreneur comes in and they're like, oh yeah, I have this idea, I want to do these other things. I'm like, but I don't know if I should leave my job. Like that's the first thing. I don't know if I can get used to not working with this. I'm like, dude, if that is your concern, like whether you can live a year or not without your job, like you have no idea what you're getting into, man.
Yeah.
And you're either gonna like, shine or whatever, or you're gonna learn whether you have true grit, right? And that's
I think you make a great point about the Bay Area and access to communities and culture that can help elevate you.
Yeah.
In a sense, because the best and the brightest are still drawn to the Bay Area. And when you're operating with people who are more experienced than you or more accomplished,
which feels like it's everybody, right?
They pull you up to their level.
Yeah.
They don't,
or at least they pull you a little bit up high. I don't know if you're at their level, but they pull you up higher.
Higher, for sure.
Yeah.
We can agree on that. And wondering if some of these experiences that you've had could have happened in other ecosystems.
Do you want my honest answer? Like, I don't think they would have. I don't think they would have. I mean, obviously, listen, you'll see a lot of articles of the ones that we're mentioning in Endeavor and all these spaces, like what's the next Silicon Valley, whatever. And of course, you can point out I know lots of very smart people. They moved to Austin. There's a startup scene in Seattle. There's a startup scene in New York. There's a startup scene in Portland. Like all the places that the Bay Area has been just spitting out because of all the gentrification and all the problems that we've been having there, well, right? Yeah. And so, there's talent that goes everywhere else. But, there's still a but there. Like, it's different, man. Like, it's a very special place. And
still the best place to network, still the best place to raise capital.
I think so, right? Like, it's funny because you heard one of the investors at Back Up 2 said, it's like, hey, man, I would love to invest in your company. And say, yeah, of course, I would probably, would do that. But I tell the other entrepreneurs, right? Like, if I'm going to raise money, I go where people are raising money. Like, why would I stick anywhere else? I just go where people raise money.
Yeah.
Guess what? Because here, there's like less people. Here, meaning anywhere in the world. I mean Lima specifically.
Barrier, friction to the process.
Like, the competition is smaller, right? It's like, imagine, I mean, you can think of it in many ways, right? Like if you're going to buy fruit, you can buy fruit at the supermarket store or your Whole Foods, or if like you have the chance of driving 10 minutes and go to the actual farmer, right? Like the prices are going to be different. The quality is going to be different. Like everything, the experience is going to be different.
Sure.
And so I can buy, like I'm in San Francisco, right? Like if I'm in San Francisco, I want to buy wine. I can buy wine at the Whole Foods or Safeway or whatever. Or I can go buy wine in Sonoma, right? Or Napa Valley.
Yeah.
And yeah, the wine might be the same, but the experience, like everything, the wealth of difference, it's going to be completely different. So why would I say if we live in a global economy and you're competing globally, you're not competing in Lima, you want to be the best X company in, Lima, and when you're thinking about expanding, you're like, oh yeah, I'm expanding to San Isidro, Callao, whatever. You start putting all those small cities. Like you don't do that, right? Like you're competing in the world. And so
that's a very different mindset.
It is.
And that's not as common as like focusing on MIPEs and PYMEs, SMEs.
Yeah, exactly. So that's something that has to change from here. I completely agree. And it's just, pounded on them when they tell me that. I'm like, so here I talk to 10 investors or 10 funds or whatever, and that's it. Those are my options. Or I get on a plane and 14 hours later, there's like thousands and thousands of funds, literally thousands of funds, where if I actually have a good value proposition and a good idea and whatever, like, I could expose. Like, so guess where I'm more likely, just in pure numbers, more likely to find money, right? Like I go to where all those guys are. And then the moment that I'm there, then I say, hey, where are the customers that I want? I can either go and compete in a market that is saturated, or I compete in a market like Latin America where I'm like the only guy here, right? Like selling this kind of software with AI and detection on, automatic extraction and stuff. So I can do, calculations of, production of a grape or whatever. I never heard of this. And then, I'm like the only one. Of course, I'm going to sell more. Of course, I'm going to capture the market really quick.
Is there also a challenge in educating the customer
For sure
on the solution you're offering?
For sure.
Especially if that customer doesn't even recognize that there's a problem or acknowledge that there's a problem.
For sure. And that just happens everywhere, right? And I mean, there are cultural implications, right? Like you said, Mexico is like, very similar to Peru and Bolivia, Chile, whatever. No, right? Like there's different levels of sophistication in a particular vertical. You can find different levels of sophistication in different countries. Not that one is more than the other, whatever. But yeah, like I'm sorry, this vertical in this country is way more advanced than the other vertical, the same vertical in this other country. It's just the way it is. And
yeah,
so
that's a good point.
The sales cycle is going to be different. The sales process is going to be different. And so then you have to ask yourself a question: why am I trying to sell to this guy here? Do I need to educate him, or do I wait till they get educated and just jump on the plane and sell to this other guy over here? And I'm more of a mindset. I'm like, just jump on the plane, man. Go and sell to the other guy. Why are you gonna sell to the folks that don't even want to acknowledge or don't get it? Just sell to the ones that do. There's so many customers in the world.
Yeah.
Right. So just go sell to them.
Latin America, I think, largely is overlooked, or it's an afterthought. For many North Americans.
For sure.
And coming from Southeast Asia orientation.
Which is up dance and some other places.
Population wise, similar, about 630 to 650 million people. One of the advantages I see here is that, with the exception of Brazil, everyone speaks Spanish. At least in major urban areas.
So you would think that maybe the marketing material and the stuff will be the same because you have one language and then you do all that, and we have...
The words are different. The cultures, although there's an underlying shared component, nuances across.
I think for certain markets, it's a huge advantage, and for other markets, it's not. And it's not a one-size-fits-all, right? You see Rappi, for example, here expanding like crazy.
Right.
Because they get it. They do a little nuances, like they have the little details of the cultural things down, and they are expanding like crazy, but they don't have a full-blown competition from anywhere else, and they get first movers advantage. But, you just, and other things, and again, that's consumer product, right? Like in B2B, like in the heavy tech thing, like for us, like, the farms in the U.S. are going to be doing precision agriculture, for example, but the farms in Peru and other places are not. So then the question becomes: do you sell to the farms directly? Good luck, man. Or just sell to the government, where they have innovation funds that can finance the stuff for the same farmers. So the
Latin American
governments, right? And so although the end user might be the same, the institution or the entity that you're selling to is completely different, right? And so the process is completely different. And then there's legal, nuances on how you set things up, right? Because if you're, foreign entity, in certain cases, you don't pay any taxes. But in other cases, you're going to get taxed twice, right? Double the amount. And so how you structure those deals, it's also important to try to minimize the amount of risk, and also the tax hit that you get. You don't want to get taxed in the U.S. and here and there and everywhere at the same time. At the end, you're just getting 40%. Instead of your margin being 95%, your margin ends up being 40, right? Just because it's taxed everywhere. You have to also understand what's a good, tax revenue structure that you need to set up. And those are things that you just, they're change. It's going to be different how I sell in the different countries in Latin America based on that.
Of all the countries in Latin America, which one do you either have the most action in, or do you see the most potential in the future?
I mean, they all have potential, right? And I would say you have to look at it from a population, depends on the product that you have to see if this is a consumer product, right? You just have to look at population.
For your company specifically?
For my company, I have to look at which ones are the companies that required more geospatial analytics, right? What are the countries that are more, in which ones are the ones that understand that urban planning is important? Which ones understand that keeping a cadastre up to date is important? Which ones understand that, or care that, they want to measure production of a certain kind of crop in agriculture? Which ones? And so it's funny because the same technology applies to different places, but perfect example, right? Latin, like Peru has great stuff in mining, right? So illegal mining is important here, but illegal mining is not really important in, I don't know, just big in Costa Rica. Legal mining is not important there, right? Legal mining is not going to be important right now in Venezuela, no. But oil exploration might be, right? Anyway, Venezuela has other problems. It's a different situation, but you have to start thinking about those things, right?
Yeah.
Like it might be, the Venezuela right now, for example, nobody looks at it as a market, and I understand that, but you could be preparing because that situation is going to change, right?
As I understand, folks are moving in, purchasing homes.
Oh, for sure. But I'm saying, like, from a startup, I mean, unless your startup is purchasing homes, of course, right? But like if you're preparing it as a market, right? A market that used to have a big oil industry and you have some good value proposition for an oil company, you just have to wait 3 years and then just get in, boom, full on, or maybe less than that, right? And so there are things like that. There's investments that go from the World Bank, right, for all the countries. So you just keep an eye on those and you're like, oh, look, there's a whole bunch of investment in like urban planning for this, or disasters, man. Disasters happen all the time. We had an earthquake yesterday, like mini earthquake here in Callao, right? People are like, oh my God, the earthquake. But Saturday, it was a lot bigger.
Yeah.
And you have like El Niño Costero, all these things with El Niño that come in, and those things are going to happen more. Like global warming is a real thing, as much as you hear groups of people that say that no, that's not real. So that those things are going to happen more, and the question is like if your software, your business can be used for like disaster prevention or during the disaster itself, you just have to be prepared. Right? Not that you want that to happen, but
no, but you
just have to be prepared because it's going to happen. And once it happens,
and it's going to happen.
Yeah. So there are budgets that are being released for those things to be prepared. And
so on the topic of global warming, wondering if the dialogue that's been happening in the U.S. surprised you at all while you were living there, or can you talk a bit how the U.S. or your time in SF has changed in 2021 year?
Oh yeah, you're talking about the last few years, the exchange that we were talking about. Yeah, it's very difficult. I mean, obviously, I see a huge change culturally, right, in San Francisco in the past 10 years for sure. But also, listen, I was there pre 9/11 and post 9/11.
Yeah.
And those were very different eras, right? Like I think for everyone, right? And they really grew up on that. You're from New York, so I don't know if you grew up in New York, but if you did,
I did.
It's like before and after, very clear.
Yeah, I regret that younger generations of Americans won't know what it was like to live in the U.S. before September 11th, because there was a definite shift in the mentalities and mindsets among the people, and of course that's reflected in the policies,
for sure,
foreign policies of the U.S.
For sure, I think in that scenario, listen, I mean, the world as a whole is different, not just the U.S., because it has implications for the rest of the world. You would there are implications in general for foreign policies that, shifted regions, that economically changed even development of Latin America, right? For other places, it might have been also really bad, right? Like in Middle East or whatever, there's a lot of focus there.
Yeah.
But, in Latin America, you actually see that, there's a spring the other way, right? Where things are good. And so I don't know if it's related or not. I don't even dare to question that, or even put an opinion there. But what I would say is that the world is constantly changing. Wars are always happening. Global warming is things that are happening. The effect of what you're talking about in the US with different policies. It's not just particular to the US. I mean, you see things like that, similar resurgence in Germany. You see the Brexit stuff.
Definitely.
And like, so I wouldn't say it's just there. In France also a whole bunch of stuff related to that. And so I would just say, we can always go back and say how beautiful Silicon Valley in San Francisco was before gentrification, the startup scene, everything. But then you would be not remembering the dot-com bust and people that were not having a good time during that, right?
Yeah.
And so, which by the way, I lived in the US through that stuff too. And so,
I think it's important to note then just how long of a trajectory your entrepreneurial journey has been related to SF.
Yeah. But I didn't live in in SF during that time, but I was like reading and learning about that stuff, right? But I saw it. I saw it because people were dropping in college and moving over there and to do things. And listen, I mean, the story of all the Bay Area in Silicon Valley is very long. We saw some of that presentation.
Yeah,
that's just
decade.
Scratching
the
surface. And it's ecosystems spring. I don't think you're gonna see something like that spring anywhere else. I think people want to be optimistic and try to analyze it and nitpick it about how that grew and the connections and the whatever ex company mafia and like the semiconductors, and you can dissect all the stuff.
Yeah.
But there's something very special and very unique about that I honestly don't think can be reproduced anywhere else. I think that you can have different versions of it, things
For
that
sure.
are, maybe even better or different, but you cannot reproduce that. I mean, you can even think about how the money for a lot of that stuff comes in, and it comes with a lot of funding for defense, right?
Yeah.
Like what other place do you also, okay, so you want to reproduce the connectivity and the network of this person invests on that. Okay, so who else has that kind of budget for defense in any country combined? Like, even if you want to combine it, right? Like,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, like, there's not that much money being spent in there. Like, Palantir just can only grow in Silicon Valley with funding from defense of that kind. Like, you're not gonna have that, right?
And this is, I think, an example of government supporting innovation.
For sure.
It's usually
For sure. I mean, self-driving cars, the DARPA challenge, like the creation of the internet, right? Like all that stuff requires a funding on a level that you can only get in certain ecosystems, right? And you have to recognize we can always be negative about, defense in this way or that way, but you have to recognize that you wouldn't have that stuff in the Wi-Fi. Man, I mean, I can just go on to a whole bunch of things that exist because of that, right?
I think it's easy to forget in today's narrative, especially the anti-globalization rhetoric that has emerged.
Yeah.
As we draw to a close, I want to give you the opportunity to talk about anything that I didn't ask you that you want to mention, whether it's about you, your company, Lima, Peru, your time in the US, or for example, as an alternative, what's the best advice that you've ever gotten?
Oh, I don't know what's the best advice that I've ever gotten. People have advised me a whole bunch of things, and a lot of probably good advice I've ignored. I'm pretty sure I'm a little bit hard-headed that way. Um, but I guess maybe what we do, I should have mentioned what we do, right? So we do maps, and we do maps in the cloud, and we concentrate on two things. We concentrate on mobile for doing data collection, and we concentrate on all the geoanalytics, what you do after you collect all that. And for us, as a company, I think we're in a very exciting time because we're seeing the how we can apply just like weapons in general. Like you can, there's certain technologies that are used for weapons, but you can adapt them to something else. And I think with GIS and maps and stuff, I think a lot of funding for that, just in the same topic that we were talking about before, came in from defense. I mean, I used to work at Esri, and a lot of their money, even if they go and say other stuff, came from defense. I was there, right? Like I saw defense. But I think for us as a company in all the mapping space, I see a lot of potential how we can, improve municipalities for getting more money instead of going and begging people for it. Like they can increase their revenue by improving, like their inventory and the cadastres. I see a lot of potential.
Yeah.
What we're doing with disaster response, because we're gonna have more disasters coming in. I see a lot of stuff for doing just good work in general. So I'm really excited, and I can only hope that the governments of my own country realize the potential there. So I think they still have not. Um,
And do you think that's just lack of awareness or focusing on other, in their minds, more pressing priorities?
when you're doing a company, you can focus on the today and you can focus on the future. You should always focus on both. Like you have to focus on the day to day, but you cannot just do day to day. You have to look at the future, right? I think that sadly, um, a lot of the stuff that I see in government in my own country is that they don't focus on the future. And a problem with that is, I mean, it's just clear, right? Like you see a big project where they're building a new road, right? So when you're building a new road, it might be a 10-year or a 15-year project, right? And if you're doing a 10 or 15-year project, you have to ask yourself, what does the world look like 10 or 15 years from now?
When you finish.
Right. Not when you're building it right now.
Yeah.
And those are projects that cost a lot of money. There's a lot of investment for them. And I don't see them looking at that, right? I see them looking at, hey, this is what we need now. And, they're starting the project now, they finish in 15 years, but it's what they wish they had right now.
Yeah.
I'm like,
well, they should have started 10, 15 years.
Yeah, but, remember how the world was 10 years ago. 10 years ago, not everybody here had smartphones. In the US, they might, most of them. But now everybody has smartphones everywhere, right? So, like, you have to be planning for what it looks like when you have data needs of that kind. With cars, my friends do companies for self-driving cars, and they sell them, right, to other places. And like I see when I was looking outside my apartment, the Uber cars and Waymos and all that self-driving cars, they drive by themselves, right?
Do you miss seeing those moments of inspiration?
I do. But those are inspiration then, and when I come here, they're frustration for the same stuff that I see. I'm like, dude, how can you not be planning for self-driving cars everywhere in 15 years? Is this the infrastructure that you need to be building when you finish and you have all these things there? Do you realize that we're going to have a different economy of like subscription-based cars? People might not even be buying cars. It's subscription-based, right? It's what Uber and Lyft and everybody's pointing to, because that you're going to buy your Netflix plan of cars. So I don't own a car. Right? I don't know. I use Uber all the time, or whatever, Beat Taxi Beat or whatever it's in here, right? And so,
yeah,
Why, like, it's clear to know that I'm going to buy a subscription for like, I don't know, 300 hours a month of cars, and it's going to cost me this. And all the cars are going to talk to each other and they're going to drive them themselves. That's not the project that they're building, that they're going to finish 15 years from now.
And do you think they can't picture that?
Just focusing on the today, the day to day, and not focusing on the future.
So they haven't even thought of it. Interesting. Yeah, no, I think that's a great point, Raji, especially because things will change, I think, both more quickly and more slowly than we think. And to give you an example, like the mobile penetration rates in places like,
well, that's a given. I mean, like I already
in other places, not in Peru, Kenya. I'm thinking of mobile payments, Myanmar, mobile penetration rates, and here in Peru, we were talking about fintech at the fintech forum.
Yeah,
those changes are definitely coming
for sure.
And there's no doubt about that. And it's I think part of the responsibility lies in the public sector to have that vision of what the infrastructure is going to be like, and to set the table, if you will, so that the private sector can do what they do best.
Yeah, but I think the advantage that some of the other countries have, and the rest of the world, is that they think it through. It's totally cultural, right? Like, it's not smarter or less smart. It's not like more abilities. It's like, it's cultural, right? You can see that also in things like, in the US and other places, people plan for retirement, right? Like, so you think about the future.
Yeah.
You have retirement accounts, you plan for that. In other places, like, sadly in my country, people don't plan for that, right? So there's no planning for the future. It's just like now. And
are your children expected to take care of you after a certain age?
Yeah, I think most people do. And in fact, a lot of we have people that work with us who still live at home, stuff, right? It doesn't matter how much money they make. It doesn't matter if they actually make the most amount of money than anybody else. They live at home. It's just cultural.
Yeah.
Like purely cultural. And so, I mean, those are that you asked me. I mean, going back to the question you asked me originally, I'm like, are the things that you're adapting to? I'm like, yeah, that's quite a few of them, right? This is culture. Like, I am Peruvian. I feel Peruvian. This is my country. This is my home. This is what I have. But at the same time, I'm looking at it with different eyes, and it's I see so much potential everywhere and so many opportunities. I mean, like, this is a place to make money, like a lot of stuff. And
that's the spirit that you have currently now that you're back.
Yeah. I'm sure I'm going to be disappointed with a whole bunch of things. I'm sure, like I was disappointed also in the US with a lot of changes in the past few years. But
yeah, it's definitely been a clear departure from, I think, the norm in politics.
Of course.
In certain areas. It'll be interesting to see what happens next year with the election. But yeah, no, it's great to hear about your return to Peru, or your reintegration into Peru. And of course, I wish you the best. I'll be looking forward to seeing the official news as it's released on the acquisition. And all the best for the future. Thanks so much for your time and for joining.
Yeah,
Raji.
my
Really
pleasure.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
My conversation with Raji was one of my favorite interviews this season. I was struck by how frank Raji was in assessing the startup challenges in Peru and Latin America, especially through the lens of his experiences in Silicon Valley. After talking to Raji, it was clear that he could see the impact of exponential technologies in Peru, his homeland. That future orientation and vision is so valuable when paired with a robust transnational professional network, deep tech experience, and supportive personal relationships. The startup ecosystem in Peru is stronger because of his presence there. I hope you'll join us next week when I examine another element of Peru's startup ecosystem, an accelerator with a special focus on edtech or education technology. In the meantime, feel free to reach out directly to me if you'd like to learn more information about the Planetary Potential podcast, or if you'd like to learn more about upcoming interviews. Thank you.